Again, good evening. I'm glad to introduce Dr. Tamim Al-Barouthi, who will have a closing remarks of this conference, and following that, the final communique of this conference. Then there is time for the journalists and the participants if they have any question regarding the final communique to ask their questions. Please be seated in your places because we will have live broadcast of this session. Thank you for your cooperation. Tamim al-Barouthi, most Arabs know him as a poet. He is also an international diplomat and a teacher of political science. He worked as as a teacher or as professor of comparative political sciences in Georgetown University in Washington and the Free Berlin University and the American University in Cairo, and a researcher in the advanced studies in Germany in 2007 and 2008, and he worked in the United Nations as a consultant and as a diplomat from 2011 to 2017, and he participated in several initiatives to bring the political powers that participated in the January Revolution of Egypt in 2011 closer to each other. He has 9 books that are published, 2 in the political theory and political history in the Arab Orient. Dr. Tamim, please, the floor is yours. Hello. I would like to thank the International Organization Against Apartheid and Racist Discrimination and their partners for holding this conference and inviting me to it. And I would like to thank this generous country for hosting us. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for your participation, dear friends. At the end of this conference, I talk to you in 3 points. The first, that we may be at the edge of a new Nakba or catastrophe. The second one, how we can prevent it. And the third point is the position of your conference or the role of your conference in that. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the strategic circumstances in the world and the region make things likely that Israel will bring the entire world and the region into a new Nakba, similar to the Nakba of 1947, whether by military action or the economic embargo, because Israel has never been, since its establishment, as reassured as it is today or as preoccupied or worried as it is. It is reassured because its northern borders were consumed in a war that was the most costly one since a century, and whenever we see that it is coming to a close, it reinvigorates. Where its southern border sees that there is a country that is a friendly state to it and an ally to it, and Israel has never been the largest in population or the most or the richest one. The armed factions on the heads of the mountains and with an authority that is committed to the Oslo Accords and that is coordinating with it. Gaza, even if it is resisting, it doesn't have its strategic depth because of the close coordination between the government of the coup d'etat in Egypt and the Israeli government. And the current U.S. administration is the most rightist one, and it is more influential in the policies of the region. The worry of Israel comes from the number of the Arabs in Palestine, the historical place, city of or country of Palestine, Muslims and Christians, those that were occupied in 1967 or 1948, is larger than the number of the Jew-Israeli population in the last 2 years, and this demographics might continue to increase, and Israel can only fill the gap through the immigration. Today, whether people are Jews or not, they are safer in Paris or Berlin than being in Haifa or Adomin. And the younger generation of Palestine are younger and less franchised, which made them have more threat to Israel, and the wall, the segregation wall, and the fences in Israel, in Palestine, are only ink on paper if there is a conflict to be between these two groups. And the history shows that the war of gangs can be costly more than the classic wars, regardless who is the victor of these wars. What makes Israel worried is that Israel has never made a critical or a final victory since 1967. It didn't achieve victory in 1967 or the exhaustion war in 1968, and when it invaded Lebanon in 1982, in 80 it withdrew, and in 1982 the peace talks led to Al Jalil, and Al Jalil now has a weapon that is coming up from Lebanon. And what Israeli enemy made is that they created a Lebanese weapon, threatening it on the northern borders instead of the Palestinian weapons, and none of the its campaigns against Lebanon in the 90s or in 2006 and 2008 or against Lebanon, or those invasion or offensives against Gaza. So these factors are worrisome for Israel. The demographic change and the change in the war, in the shape of war, from a formal classic one into a popular one. In 2011, in specific, it was clear that neutralizing Egypt from the conflict with Israel is not assured or not ensured for the longer run, and it could be inevitable that it will be part of that because of the social and economic and political factors in Egypt, even if it didn't come yet. Number two, the increase of the Turkish and Iranian force in the region creates a strategic threat against the Israeli occupation on the mid and long term. That's why Tel Aviv sees that it is in its best interest to hinder any advancement in the strategic force of these two countries and to hinder any cooperation between them and between their Arab allies. It wishes to see them clashing and to see a change in their regimes. This is shown explicitly with one of the countries by Israel, and it is implicitly shown with the other one. Those two regimes, one is established on a popular revolution and the other one on the popular elections, and Israel knows where the public sentiment is in these regions and in these countries towards the Palestinian rights. Israel had a point in January and February 2011 where it faced the potential that Egypt also will be a country ruled by someone that is selected by the people, and it will be the third of three countries, and Israel will be under the pressure between two resistance powers in the south and the north, with a strategic depth from Qazwin Sea to Tunisia and from Sudan to the north in Turkey. And there was, if the war in Syria and the coup in Egyptian changed that, Israel will not rest assured about that, because the war in Syria will not be forever, and the coup in Egypt will not settle. So So the plan, or the planners in Israel, the Israeli occupation, will see that this is the point to put a final solution for the Palestinian cause in favor of Tel Aviv, and to create the factors of assurance for Israel in order to eliminate the worrisome factors. This point is closer than ever in this time, because the Palestinians are for sure increasing, whereas those who love the Palestinians are there, whereas those that love Israel, or they are allies to Israel, are not sure to be there all the time. That's why Israel will exploit the time to this time in order to change the situation in the lands of 1948 and the Gaza and West Bank, in order, whether by the economic strangulation or by the military war. The decision of recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and that the settlements are not in a breach of the international community, and annexing the Jordan Valley and adopting that in the Knesset are historic decisions, and they are taking the decisions with full conscience that this will eliminate the narrative of the two states and end the peace process. The Palestinians are trying to get everything that they lost in 1948 in exchange of having a limited sovereignty Palestinian state under the Israeli supervision, and they call this independence. But because of the changes and the military powers made this plan not enough to save Israel in the perspective of their leaders. So if leaders of major countries like Egypt fell under the pressure of its people, the fall of the Palestinian Authority, a weak authority under the pressure of its people, is likely, and the Israelis will not be will have full control over the lands of 48, and the Israelis will continue a settlement on other territories. All of that shows that they are conscious that Israel wants to eliminate the Palestinian cause. So this is a new Nakba, whether it is in a military shape or by economic pressure. If the first Nakba led to several other Nakbas or catastrophes that nobody was spared in this Orient, the second one will not be of lesser evil, not only in the region but in the entire world. Therefore, there must be another track that will, as an alternative to all other tracks that led us to this new catastrophe and the signs of that. This conference is part of a lot of efforts that are exerted and are significant in this field. When we are talking about Israel, that it established an apartheid system in the historic Palestine at large, it's not enough to convince each other how oppressive Israel is or how oppressed the Palestinians are. We need to create an alternative narrative and policy, which is the minimum that all the parties that are in dispute can agree on. Israel is an apartheid system, and this system, if remains as is, it's not only a threat against the Palestinian, it's a threat to all the region and the entire world, its security and stability. If those who defend Israel said that the minority of the Arab Palestinians in the behind the green line better than the Palestinians on the rest of the world, they forget that those became minority only through the discrimination, racist discrimination, and ethnic cleansing. And those who are outside Israel, they are similar to those, and they are ruled by the same apartheid system that was designed for them. In addition to that, we have the Palestinians who are living under the military Israeli occupation since 1967. The oppression of Israel goes beyond Palestinians to all of the region. And here I'm not only talking about the military invasion or offensive of the states of the country, including Tunisia, Iraq, Sudan, and Syria, and Lebanon. I'm talking about further oppression that is the logic of Israel. Israel is the only state on the face of earth that gives the citizenship and prevents it on the basis of the inherited religion. It provides citizenship on the basis of the inherited religion, and it has one narrative over all other narratives, which means its control over Jerusalem makes it imperative that a Christian or a Muslim to go and pray in Jerusalem must be authorized by Israel, and he cannot have that authority unless it is provided by Israel. And that lack of stability or balance in the beliefs between the Christians, Jews, and the Muslims is a threat, not only for the region or Palestine, but for the entire world. This oppression will lead us to a series of wars of the 11th century with the weapons that we have in the 21st century, and this danger is looming. The people are punished on things that they didn't change, on their ethnicity, religion, and where they were born. And the Islamophobia, racism, and all kinds of discrimination against people on things, on aspects they didn't choose, are all aspects of one oppression. The Israeli exception, if it is there, it will not be an exception at all. Participants in this conference, regardless of what solution they reach, they know that the only solution is equality amongst people, and the legal and legitimate work from now must focus on changing the Israeli apartheid or racist regime in Israel, and not only the practices of that regime, because this practice or this behavior is part of its entity, and Israel is Israel when it does that, and if it's not acting in such a separate racist way, it will not be Israel. The Palestinian cause cannot be separated from any other conflict because in its core it is about justice and equality of all people, and the equality of people in the region and in the world is a strength for the Palestinians, because any victory of those against those who implemented a coup d'état and all of those who resist occupation, and people from all religions and sects, Sunnis, Shia, Christians, it is a layer that adds strength to the Palestinians. Finally, your work is one item that provides strength to this river that fights against an international apartheid that was created by the old colonial powers and now is supported by the new colonial powers. It is a stream that is drawing new maps and creating new fences between mothers and their sons, and between brothers and sisters. And even if people are being drowned in the seas, or they are victims of the human traffickers, not for anything, only for the geographic coincidence that brought them into this area, whereas other people have all the options in the world when they are from the other world. Israel is also making alliances with the emerging right powers in the world, especially in the United States. Most of this right power is anti-Semitic, and whereas in Palestine, those who Israel is part of the strong powers that are oppressing others, whether their victims are Jews, Christians, or Muslims, because the oppression is oppressed are one nation regardless of their religion, and the oppressor is one nation regardless of their religion and race or ethnicity. So we are part of this nation of the oppressed regardless of our religion, and Palestine has always been a symbol of all those oppressed people. It is a country that provides its meaning and symbol to those who are prevented from getting into it, and who are the vulnerable at its gate. And whether they are holding the cross or the crescent, they become saviors of the people. Thank you very much.
نستكمل جلستنا النهائية.
We continue with our concluding point, requesting Richard Falk to deliver the
National Laws Emeritus at Princeton University in USA. He is a UN Special Rapporteur also on human rights in occupied Palestine. He was actually from 2008 to 2014. Dr. Falk, please.
It is my great honor to read the final communique of this first global conference on Israeli apartheid, dimensions, repercussions, and the means to combat, taking place in Istanbul, 29-30 November 2019. We participants at the first global conference on Israeli apartheid, convened by the Global Organization Against Racial Discrimination and Segregation, and the Union of Non-Governmental Organizations, NGOs, of the Islamic world, held in Istanbul, Turkey on 29 and 30 of November, scholars, experts, jurists, activists, and civil society representatives have gathered from all around the world to express our solidarity with the Palestinian people as they struggle for the attainment of their inalienable rights to freedom, equality, and justice. We condemn Israeli policies that discriminate against Palestinians based on their race, religion, and ethnic origin, including policies that prohibit Palestinian refugees from returning to their lands, and those that subject Palestinian citizens of Israel to institutionalized and systematic discrimination. We also condemn the inhuman acts committed by Israel against Palestinians living in the territories occupied in 1967, including the suffocating illegal blockade on Gaza, extrajudicial killings, excessive and disproportionate uses of force, summary executions, expulsion, dispossession, segregation, walls, home demolitions, administrative detention, restrictions on Palestinians' right to choose their own place of residence, their right to freedom of movement without their land, and their right to leave and return thereto. We moreover condemn the deprivation of Palestinians by Israel of their right to their natural resources and its exploitation of those resources for the use of Israelis, including settlers living on the occupied territories in violation of international law. We emphasize that such a regime and its associated practices amount to the crime of apartheid, according to the criteria set forth in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court and the International Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid, as determined by the report of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. The report entitled Israeli Practices Toward the Palestinian People and the Question of Apartheid, and affirmed by the update to that report presented at the conference by Professors Richard Falk and Virginia Tilley. We consequently determine, based on scholarly work and overwhelming evidence during the conference, that Israel is guilty of the crime of apartheid as a result of having deliberately established an institutionalized regime of systematic oppression and domination over Palestinians collectively, as a people, and individually, wherever they may be. Accordingly, we reaffirm our commitment to pursue justice and peace for all, reiterating our absolute rejection of any doctrine, regime, or practice anywhere in the world that is based on or results in any form of discrimination, injustice, or inequality. We express our alarm at the increases in incidents of racial violence, discrimination, exploitation, and rhetoric worldwide, including incidents of anti-Semitism and anti-Islamism, and categorically reject any justification put forth for such incidents. We emphasize further that international law classifies apartheid as a crime against humanity and obligates states, entities, and individuals to work individually and collectively to prevent it, end it, and punish the perpetrators of this crime. We conclude that dismantling the Israeli apartheid regime, as well as all forms of racial discrimination, exploitation, and segregation, is a necessary condition for reaching a true, just, and durable peace. We further emphasize that focusing on Israel's practice of apartheid against the Palestinian people does not in any way diminish the gravity of other crimes and violations of international law committed by Israel, including violations of the Charter of the United Nations, international humanitarian law, and international human rights law. Based on the above, the participants in the first global conference on Israeli apartheid, dimensions, repercussions, and the means to combat it, recognizing that the Palestinian people bear the brunt of gross injustice and have been resisting it for decades, recognizing also the past and continuing efforts of entities and individuals around the world to in support of the Palestinian people and their resistance, recognizing further that the existence of an apartheid regime anywhere is not only morally reprehensible and a transgression of values of justice and equality, but also constitutes a threat to regional and international peace and security. Cognizant of our collective duty and ability to combat all systems of apartheid and contribute to their dismantlement, and that action by every person, entity, and state is necessary to this endeavor. Committing to continue to work together and with all individuals and entities committed to justice, human rights, and equality until justice is served and the Israeli apartheid regime is fully dismantled as a precondition to a genuine and sustainable peace. Decide to form the global coalition against apartheid along the following guidelines. 1, the coalition shall be open to all individuals and organizations committed to the principles of justice, equality, and dignity for all. 2, the goal of the coalition is to contribute to and expedite the dismantlement of the Israeli apartheid regime imposed on the Palestinian people within the framework of achieving equality, dignity, and justice for all. 3, the coalition shall use all legal means toward that end. 4, the coalition shall act as a forum and support network allowing its members to maximize the impact of their work in their respective fields, including research, awareness raising, legal action, and activities of boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS, with a view to combating Israeli apartheid. 5, in all its initiatives and activities, the coalition shall adhere to the principles set forth in international law and in particular, the Charter of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, international humanitarian law, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the International Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid, and the Nuremberg Principles of International Criminal Law. Thank you for your patience.
تفضل. السادة المشاركون.
Dear guests, some of the speakers, please come to the stage to participate with Dr. Rima in responding to questions posed by the audience that may be posed after the reciting of the final communique. Dear guests, any question related to any detail of this communique or any other piece of information that you may need before concluding this conference, dear speakers, our dear speakers are here to respond to your questions. Please go ahead. Can you please give us a microphone? Hello. First of all, thank you very much for your words and for delivering the final communique. I feel that the practical dimension is missing. How would we do dismantling for the apartheid and how we will do that? What do we mean by dismantling the apartheid? The second remark is because I really care about the conference and its cause, because the report provided an endorsement for BDS and because it adopted the boycott campaign, and because I see it as one of the most important tools against the Israeli occupation. I have noticed that most really took my attention that most of the water here is from Nestle, and Nestle is one of the companies that support the Israeli occupation, and I thought that we should have used another company because we should be consistent in our cause in this conference. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you please repeat the first question? She said that the final communique, in her opinion, is lacking a dimension of practicality with regard to the dismantling of the apartheid. Thank you very much indeed for this important question. It is a very important point, and it is the subsequent steps after this. We mentioned at the beginning of this conference, we said that this conference is not an objective per se. We hope that it's going to be the beginning of a track, not the end of that. We tried to collect together different segments of the Palestinian people international organization against the apartheid, the ones that support human rights, the ones that are supportive of the struggle of the Palestinian people, in order to bring them all together in this international coalition. But your PDS note, when we say that this conference is on apartheid, the first step in resisting that is boycotting this regime and then punishing that regime on the crime. Boycott is very important in dealing with apartheid. With Nestle, you are right. I don't know what I'm going to do or say about that, but we will take this into consideration in our coming conferences. Go ahead, please. Thank you very much. It is a continuity for what she asked. It is a brief intervention and question. When I go back 20 years back to 1999, when we were trying, they were trying to drag us to the Oslo Accords to participate in one of the institutions of the occupation. It is the Bern institution for normalization. We withdrew, but we were shocked and surprised. There are hundreds of delegations that come from Latin America. My question is, did you approach Latin America for that? The second point, when I was in Russia, we have to target Central Asia republics. There are several republics, and we have to approach them. We have friends there. Europe is covered, the Middle East is covered, America is covered. We need to reach to the Russian-speaking areas and the Latin America areas. So you suggest that we expand the geographical outreach of this coalition? And I think that this is a proposal that's worth noting in our next endeavors. I would like to insist on what you said, that it is worthy of care. I would like you to consider yourselves as partners to this project. Each one of us has a little circle in which we revolve. We know the activists. If you have contacts in Central Asia, in Malaysia, Indonesia, and other European countries, in Latin America, wherever they are, I wish that you would nominate individuals, entities, institutions, and organizations that may join this coalition, and in cooperation with you, we will achieve that end. Please go ahead. I think that our meeting in this place, per se, is an achievement to meet for one goal, which is boycotting the occupation and supporting the resistance and steadfastness of the Palestinian people, who has the most just and fair cause in modern history. I think that each one of us who come from different countries, different backgrounds, and multiple religions and ethnicities and races, each one of us in their own place should be an ambassador of this cause. It is our duty to defend it strongly, because we are defending a rightful cause. My second point, our enemy who stole our land and who targeted our holy places and who did the Nakba to us in 48 and in 67 wants us to be hopeless. They stole our lands. Now they are moving to stealing our culture, our mindset, our ideology, and our morals and our morale. Our moral should be high. I am against and I reject the culture of frustration. We didn't come here for self-flagellation or to repeat things that are related to surrendering or to frustration. We are not in surrender. We are not frustrated. The third final point, there are speakers who talked about the Christian Zionism in one of the last speakers. We do not recognize that, and I wish that all those who use that should not use it. We should not accept terminology and language that is promoted to us by the Zionist lobby in America and other places. Christian churches, Christianity is the religion of love, mercy, and peace. Zionism is a racial movement, and it is not okay to mix between a religion and a terrorist racial movement that is the root cause for all what we have reached today of nakbas and catastrophes and disasters. This terminology is not acceptable. We do not have it. This terminology is imported from the West. We do not accept that. Those are Zionized people. Their literature is Zionist. It's not related to Christianity, and it's not related to the values of the gospel and the Holy Scripture in any way. Thank you very much. Please go ahead. Thank you very much. We extend thanks to Dr. Rima and her team for organizing this conference, and we extend thanks to Turkey for hosting this conference. We extend thanks to Turkey that contributed to the return, or we thank the Turkish humanitarian role that contributed to the return of the refugees of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Albanian refugees as at the middle 90s. And we thank Turkey for the humanitarian role playing from Myanmar to Turkestan, and not only in Palestine. Dr. Rima, in her intervention, said that it's not the role of civil society organizations only. It is a responsibility of the vulnerable countries, and I think that this opened important doors for you and for the team. With many thanks to form counter forces, at least to counter the soft power of the Zionist entity that's creating public opinion. At the second point, we are witnessing a transition phase. We have studied that we as a body in the Arab world, we are being invaded by a virus, but we transitioned from viruses to cancer, particularly because the cancerization is being extended through normalization, whether it is explicit or implicit. This is why we should have thought about how we're going to penetrate the concrete walls, and now we have to think of how to penetrate the economic walls, and as one of the audience said, the cyber walls. I would like to seize the opportunity that we have brothers here from the areas of 1948, and I don't agree with the name, of course, of 1948. We've read some articles, just like what Mr. Hani Masri said, that some people are saying that, that there is a movement of sale through mediators who may be foreigners for Palestinians, particularly in Old Jerusalem. The last point, of course, there is an international change that is resulted from the sagging international system. Would we continue through this movement to formulate a new movement utilizing the general weakness in the current international system? Would you prefer a specific person to respond? Or your notes, in other words? For everybody. I would like to express and say that we, as the human species. We should not ask about the race and origin. As Turks, we do not ask where are you from. We ask whether this person is wronged or has been subject to injustice. We always side with the oppressed. We always face the oppressors. It is our humanitarian duty that we will bear in life. Jalaluddin Rumi said, all that you know depends on the human who understands you. I agree with her opinion. We have to manage these affairs in the right way. Civil society organizations have large-scale duties. We cannot perform the duties of states, but civil society organizations can achieve things that countries cannot achieve. As civil society organizations, what can we do? How can we it is very important to know how to exercise pressure on countries and raise the awareness of the countries for the Palestinian cause. Thank you very much.
The importance of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, given the weakness, inaction, and complicity of the so-called international community, the strength we have as citizens, as trade unions, as political parties is in boycotting. Nobody can force us to do business with Israel. Nobody can force us to invest in Israel. And the demand to boycott Israel is a minimal demand. It's the Europeans and Americans act as if, and others, by the way, including many Arab states that are investing in Israel directly or indirectly, but they act as if it's some big request. But the minimum request is to ask people not to aid and abet those who are killing you and murdering you and stealing your land. Nobody asked the European Union or the United States to launch a task force to invade Israel and liberate Palestine. The only thing we're asking is, don't help Israel to murder our children. Don't profit from Israel's theft of our land and our water. And yet, this is considered too much to ask. So we have to start from a position of confidence that the request to boycott Israel is legitimate. It is the very minimum that people around the world should be asked to do, and it is effective. And we saw that in the case of South Africa, that the boycott of South Africa, the withdrawal of investments, the refusal to lend money to South African banks and the South African government forced the regime to end its apartheid policy. And Israel could be forced even as quickly if the world were on the side of the Palestinian people and against Israeli apartheid. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ali.
Can I ask our audience to pose brief questions?
The international community has multiple roles to play, whether it's through the BDS movement, through the enactment of civil societies in all our respective countries, towards putting pressure on our governments to ensure that Israel complies with international law. Until the international community is a part of the solution, we're a big part of the problem.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you. Dr. حيان بعطون ممكن رائدة وراكي.
Raida, Dr. Hayyan. Thank you, Hayyan Haidar from Lebanon. I extend thanks to all those who contributed to making this meeting a success, most prominent of which is Dr. Rima, the Lionheart Khalaf. I have two suggestions. I was very happy with Mrs. Haneen's speech that opened the role for us to get out of the box. as they say in the Western languages, so that we reconceptualize concepts. So I suggest that we have a meeting for the private sector. Don't you that we need to address the Arab government, just like you said. First, we have two weapons, and this returning to boycott. It's not only boycott of settlements, it is boycotting. In Lebanon, we still have the law of boycotting the Zionists, or what the so-called Israeli state. Second, there is the Camp David agreement, treaty, and the Oslo Accords and the Araba treaty, only hinting that those agreements would be, or any of them would be frozen or cancelled, would be effective. I discussed with the Professor Falk this morning, and in his well-known diplomacy, he referred it to me. I think that within the context of apartheid, we are witnessing a counter-attack from the anti-Semites, and then the anti-Semite campaign, they are equalizing it with anti-Zionists, just like what happened with Macron and in France and in Germany. And I've heard recently that there is a denial for the Holocaust, and they have sanctions on any who denies the Holocaust. So it is okay for them to do a farce or to mock our prophet or anything, or they say they have the freedom, but we may not even pose a question about the Holocaust or the numbers, or question the numbers of the Jews reported to be killed at that time. I think that we should say that being anti-Semite is some sort of apartheid, and anti-Zionism is that even Holocaust denial is one of that. Thank you very much indeed, Doctor.
I think I speak on behalf of everybody when I say that we need to be clear that what happened in these 2 days is not only a conference and end of the story. We are talking about the launch, or the tendency to launch, an international movement against the Israeli apartheid. This is the aim of this conference, and that's how things should be understood. The Palestinian people is facing a fierce enemy, a very imbalanced power scale, and the Palestinian people cannot face this apartheid alone. Just like the South African case, that the South Africans needed this international movement in order to counterbalance the international support for the apartheid. The same with us. We need an international movement to support the resistance of the Palestinian people on on their own land. Of course, the resistance of the Palestinian people in their land is the basic, but this anti-apartheid movement must be open and will support the struggle of the Palestinian people. Some people talk about the Arab brothers. We don't want anybody to send armies to fight Israel. We know the reality. But what we can ask from every regime and government and the state to boycott Israel completely and comprehensively, without accepting any form of formalization, because any dealing with this aggression that is taking place against the Palestinian people is a cooperation or with the injustice and oppression. I will finalize with this, that Nelson Mandela, when the liberation of the South Africa, he said 2 sentences. He said that our liberation will not be complete without the liberation of the Palestinian people, and he said the Palestinian cause is the first cause of humanity in our modern age. From that understanding that this is the most important cause of the cause of our modern history, the international movement of anti-apartheid can come together. Thank you.
I want to clarify something. No one here is here to deny the Holocaust or anything about the Holocaust. The point of a battle for justice and rights in Palestine is not a battle against justice and rights for any group. There can be no justice in Palestine that is not based on anti-racism and safety and dignity for all. I was very glad to see that in the statement, repeated several times. This is a project that seeks dignity and equality for all. It is clear that the doctrine of racial domination is antithetical to that. It is impossible to have a just peace in Palestine based on the domination of any group, Jewish or any group, Afrikaner, anywhere. That kind of doctrine cannot be attached to the power of a state. The difference between this conference and other conferences is that we are approaching that directly. There have been many conferences about Palestine, Palestinian suffering, the policies of Israel in the occupied territories, even inside Israel, regarding refugees in the Golan and everywhere. These human rights violations are old, constant, and an offense to humanity, and many of them are crimes against humanity. One of them is the crime of apartheid. What this conference is doing is bringing attention to that doctrine and saying there is no peace in Palestine unless that doctrine of racial domination is eradicated. That means that safety for Jews and Palestinians in this land, this settler colonial conflict, where 6 million Jews have come and cut their ties to their home countries and sunk roots in the land, just as they did in South Africa, there must be some arrangement that allows for peace and dignity and justice for all who live there. But that cannot happen as long as there is Zionism dominating the state. Jewish statehood, not Jewish homeland, but Jewish statehood is incompatible with a just peace. That's the difference here. That's the difference in what we are talking about. That is what we are going after. There can be no ending this conflict simply by ending the occupation. The occupation comes out of the doctrine of Jewish statehood, and as long as that doctrine is there, Israel will need the occupation, and it will perpetuate the occupation. But we have to be clear about what our goals are. There is no ending apartheid by moving a border. You can't end apartheid by partition into 2 states. All that means is to preserve apartheid in one state and eradicate it in the other one. That's illegal. It contradicts international law. So there has to be a peace through the eradication of racial domination entirely. This is a challenge for everyone because it means finding a way to bring everybody together in one state of Palestine as equal citizens. It goes deep. It requires that people confront old pain, old losses that can never be redeemed through a mere political solution. That's the great challenge of this conference and this organization, and I'm proud and humbled to be part of this. And I hope that we can all pick up that mission together and find a higher vision, as they did in South Africa, that we can all feel elevated by and ennobled by in the quest for a true justice in the land. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Muhammad, and go ahead. Yes, yes.
I want to make 2 points, and I make both my points as a South African. The first point is, and I hope people don't get offended by this, but the first point is that I think that we often have too much of an obsession in talking about Palestinian liberation, too much of an obsession with the Arab world. The world of God is expansive. Let's draw our solidarity from all over, because we know that Arab regimes today are more really interested in normalizing their relations with Israel than in supporting the Palestinian struggle, even if the Arab peoples are different. My second point, there was a lot said in this conference now as well as during the day about the South African example, and correctly so. We have been speaking about the BDS campaign, which I hope that we all support fully, as one of the examples from South Africa. But the South African struggle wasn't won just by international solidarity and by international isolation of the apartheid state. This is important because any strategy for the liberation of the Palestinian people needs to be comprehensive. The other part of how the South African struggle was won was by mass mobilization within the country and the underground movement within the country. And so when we made in the 1980s parts of South Africa ungovernable, when we made parts of South Africa no-go areas for the South African Defense Force, that contributed towards the liberation of our people. When we placed bombs and blew up post offices and electricity pylons and police stations, that was the other half of what contributed to the liberation of South Africa. So if we say that we're solidarity activists, we support fully the campaign to isolate and delegitimize the apartheid state of Israel. And we also support fully the choices of resistance that Palestinian people make for themselves within Palestine.
Thank you so much.
I just want to make a very brief comment in English because the issue was raised about anti-Semitism. I think anybody who was here over the past 2 days must have noticed that we all come so strongly against any form of discrimination or exploitation based on against the other, based on the other's religion or ethnic origin or race or whatever. Our position is based on خليني أحكي هلا بالعربي because of Hayyan. I'll switch to Arabic because I'm going to address Hayyan's comments. ونبني نحن
We are building this position because we are based on ethical background or ground that doesn't apply discrimination or reject discrimination by all means. This expanded in the past because, or this sentiment grew in the past decade because of the emergence of the extremist rightist tendency that is against Muslims or Arabs or Palestinians. Dr. Hayyan mentioned something that that we need to shed light on, which is the deformation of anti-Semitism to include combating Zionism or resisting any of the Israeli policies. And I believe we have two threats from this deformation. The first is limiting the freedom of expression and preventing people from expressing their minds on the practices of a state that defines itself as a racist country. And this also has an impact on the Jews of the world, because when we deform that and focus only on the policy of Israel, it puts the Jews of the world under different practices. And we have seen that the Israeli Prime Minister has no problem to make alliances with the ethnic states that focus on their pure ethnicity, although they had practices that are anti-Semitic. That's why, again, I repeat that this is a principled position, and we strongly denounce any discrimination based on ethnicity or race and all the practices that are against Muslims or Jews.
I'm going to take two more questions. because ليش أنا عم بحكي بالإنجليزي؟ لأنه لازم ننهي.
Because we need to end. We have a broadcast and we have limited time. So please, go ahead.
Yes. My name is Abraham Melzer. I came from Germany. I am Jewish, and I was also some years ago an Israeli, and I even served in the Israeli army. This, that you know my background. Let me say some words about the anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism is at the moment all over the world politically not correct. And this is what the Israeli government knows. The Israeli government knows very good that we are not anti-Semites. The Israeli government and the Jewish communities in Germany, for instance, say about, for instance, the Jewish Voice for Peace, that the Jewish Voice for Peace is anti-Semitic. So it is absurd. But Israel welcome anti-Semitism. They want anti-Semitism because anti-Semitism brings, first of all, Jewish to Israel, and second, it brings support to Israel. Therefore, they are all the time saying BDS is anti-Semitism. Of course, it's BDS not anti-Semitism, but they want to tell the people and governments, I mean, not government, because the government also knows what is going on. But they want to tell the people, the papers, the newspapers, which are writing in Germany at least, every day about anti-Semitism, every day, really. Yeah? So they want to teach the people BDS and everybody who is against Israel, or even not against Israel, but who is supporting Palestine, is an anti-Semite. So it wouldn't help anything which we will do. For Israel, we will be all the time anti-Semite.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes.
Evet, çok teşekkür ediyorum. Öğlenden önce
Thank you. When I had my turn to deliver a speech, I didn't have enough time, and I had other things to say. So I have a request for you. The United Nations, in Articles 5 and 6, in terms of the membership is suspended, or the membership of Israel can be suspended. So any state that doesn't apply the rules of the United Nations can be, its membership can be suspended. Yes, you talked about the apartheid in South Africa, and there was a request to suspend the membership of South Africa in the United Nations. I don't remember the date, but Germany and France vetoed that, so that's why it wasn't suspended. So the General Assembly in 1994 issued a resolution. The General Assembly prevented Israel to participate in the UN General Assembly. So states and civil society organizations must put pressure on these states in order for these states to put pressure on the United Nations to suspend the membership of Israel in the United Nations, or to eliminate its membership altogether. For example, there is the Islamic Coordination Organization that announced Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. So we need to put a pressure on the United Nations to achieve what we want. We will have only 2 more questions because our time is over and we need to leave. The gentleman at the back of the room, and we need a lady, okay, just for equality. Both have microphones. Who will start? Okay, so we will have the lady starting. Of course, I will not deliver a thank you speech because it will take forever. I would like to ask this question to Mr. Hani Al-Masri, but he's not here. Ah, he's there. Okay. He's an expert about the PLO before and after and the Palestinian Authority and all the details that he provided. This is a serious question that I would like to ask you, sir. What is the priority now? To start with ending the PLO, which is the main obstacle to end the Israeli apartheid and to create a new liberation organization or any other body, or to start with eliminating the Israeli apartheid? This is a serious question. Where should we focus our struggle? Thank you. This is a long story. But in my perspective, we will not start with this or that. The beginning should be in designing a national project, a national scheme that brings Palestinians together, and that after we define that, its outlines are ready, but we need someone to ring the bell. She's saying, I want an answer that can convince me. Well, I'm giving my answer. You may be convinced or not. If you think that if we dissolve the Palestinian Authority, all our problems will be solved, I will say just rethink about this, because without having a national framework, the authority will be dissolved and we will have 20 other authorities. And this is one of the projects of the Israel. And there is a project that is called the United Palestinian Emirates as an alternative. So if we do that, it will solve the goals of the Israel. But if we if we do anything without having a national project, it will be in the favor of the Israelis, and we will not be able to eliminate the apartheid. There are a lot of things, and we need to take into consideration that the Nakba is looming, and we need to prevent that. And if we ignite the internal conflict, it will not be possible to avoid that Nakba, but we need to find solutions for these internal disputes. One final question, then we have Mr. Kamel Hawash, and then Mr. Ali Kurd will close this conference. Go ahead, please.
Çok şaşırdım.
Sayed Dr. Zark, I'm glad to hear from what you said, and to have our voice heard is very good. Do you want to have a good example, Mr. Atallah, Mr. Bishop?
Okay, I'm asking Mariam.
Okay, I'm asking Miss Mary and Mr. Atallah. Can you take Mr. Atallah with you? Okay, I will repeat the question now. Miss Mary Crowley, do you want to have a new approach? For example, the Bishop Atallah, for example, take him with you and make a tour in England and go and meet all the officials in the United States with the bishop, and try to put pressure on Israel in such a way. Will this way be successful for you? People got bored of listening to Arabs. Maybe if you do this, people will listen to you in a better way.
Of hosting Archbishop Atalahanna on 2 separate occasions in Ireland, where he met with all of our political leaders, our church leaders, our president, leaders of trade unions and leaders of NGOs, and I can assure you he had a very powerful impact. I cannot answer the question as to whether or not it would be appropriate for him to travel and to be hosted in the UK, but I'm sure my UK colleagues would be in a position to respond to that question. But I can assure you, you have an excellent ambassador in Archbishop Atalahanna, and we cannot possibly host him often enough in Ireland.
Sayın Maria Hanım, o enerji sizde var. Lütfen deneyin.
Thank you. دكتور كامل سريعا تعليق سريع لأنه مضطرين أخذنا أكثر من الوقت.
Very quick comment.
Very pleased with the way the comments about language were dealt with, and particularly about Holocaust denial and so on. We simply cannot afford to have this new organization put in danger by the wrong language. That is extremely important, really. We have to be very careful. And therefore, going forward, we have a big job. First of all, we know that outside this hall, apartheid is not known by the masses. There's a big educational job to explain it to people, just as there is in explaining that BDS is not anti-Semitic. And I know that that, to us, is intuitive. But so, therefore, one of the most important things that this conference has to do, this new organization, is education.
Thank you.
Just a very, very quick comment. We've had a lot of mention of the effort by Zionists and their allies to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And I can mention that Professor Joseph Mesad, who is one of our participants in the conference, has done really the most exceptional work on explaining this Zionist strategy going back decades. However, the point I want to make quickly now is that there is a new effort by Israel and its allies to institutionalize a definition of anti-Semitism internationally, which defines support for Palestinian rights as a form of bigotry against Jews. So I want to say that while we have to be absolutely clear in our total opposition, our principled opposition to anti-Semitism, we also have to use international organizations and international forums to stand in the way of efforts to institutionalize and legislate this false definition of anti-Semitism. And that's an incredibly important role for organizations like this and also the ones present here today.
Thank you very much. At the end of this meeting, and before I give the floor to Mr. Ali Kurd to close the activities of this conference, I would like to thank all participants in this conference, all those who made this conference available, on top of which the IDSP, the Union of the Nation of the Islamic World, and the other organization, AARDI, and everybody who took the effort to come here and from where they are living to participate in this conference. Thanks for the organizers and thanks for your input. I believe we made a great achievement in this conference. This conference is for all of us, and God willing, we will work on all the practices, the recommendations that you have provided, and the final word will be for Mr. Ali Kurd. Please go ahead. Good evening, everyone. This is the first global conference on Israeli apartheid. We are at the end of this conference. So any state that wants to rule, it must be just. 1,500 years ago, Omar ibn al-Khattab was the caliph of the Muslims. When he came to Jerusalem, the first thing that he made wasn't only for Christians, even Jews. And he said, you are free to practice your religion and to practice your rituals. And when he wanted to pray, they showed him a place in the church of Al-Qiyamah. But he said, if I pray here, maybe the next generation will change this church into a mosque. That's the tolerance that Omar ibn al-Khattab showed. And we have taught this we have taught this tolerance to the entire world. Unfortunately, this apartheid that is practiced by Israel, we haven't seen it in any era in the past. The governor of Jerusalem under the Ottoman Empire, he sent a message to the Ottoman Sultan, the Sultan Abdul Hamid, and he said that Jerusalem was the place where Moses was walking around the streets. It is the place where Jesus was living, and it is the place that seen the night travel and the travel of Prophet Muhammad to the seventh sky. So this is a holy land for all the religions. Everybody looks at this land and sees what will happen to it. But unfortunately, we will not be able to end this strife. As you see, Israel is breaching all international laws, is not committed itself to anything, and we see that the apartheid is still going on. So we must not stand by watching without doing anything. We need to have solidarity, to work hand in hand. We have seen a number of participants who have great input, and we have organized this conference with Mr. Rima Al-Khalaf and Mr. Hawash. Thank you very much for your efforts. I believe that the conference is only the beginning, and it will continue. Thank you very much, and peace be upon you. Godspeed.